Today's topic is, should medical marijuana be used in Malaysia? As you may all know, recently, Thailand became the first country in Asia to decriminalize marijuana for medical and other purposes. Now, the usage of marijuana for medical purposes has long been a topic of controversy. So today, we've invited 5 knowledgeable experts to tell us their opinions on this topic. We are glad to have Professor Dr. Vigna, who is currently a professor from Center for Drug Research, University of Science Malaysia. We are also very happy to have Mr. Farhan Maroof, who is an associate at Farhan Maroof & Co. in KL, and he is also currently the legal advisor for Malaysia Society of Awareness, MASA. As for the disagreeing side, besides, we are glad to have Mr. Muhammad Gaus Sajahan, who is an accountant by profession who has great interest in this topic regarding legalization of marijuana in Malaysia. On top of that, we also have Mr. Ian Young, who is currently a medic student from Monash University. Lastly, we also have Mr. Randy, who is currently an engineering student from Taylor's University. So without further ado, I would like to begin with our first prompt of the session. To repeat, the prompt is, the legalization of medical marijuana is unnecessary in Malaysia. Should we begin with Mr. Gauss, who agrees with this prompt?
Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon. Thank you, UKM, for inviting me for this particular middle ground talk. I was actually not briefed of that particular session, in terms of details, but nevertheless, I have not really prepared a formal speech. But I would agree that essentially the legalization topic in Malaysia is totally irrelevant and not the need of the day, because there are so many other priorities in this country. Basically, because we are facing issues with regards to inflation, with regards to cost of living, with regards to our ringgit value that is going down, so there are so many other priorities, at the moment, in this country. And right now, the topic about legalization of this ganja basically is coming up. I'm not sure from where this particular topic is coming. I know that internationally there are certain lobbyists, certain countries that have come together to actually propose some sort of legalization for cannabis. But I think in those type of countries, they are facing different kind of issues. But you look at the countries that we are actually in developing country, and we have got so many problems, so many issues, and by just legalizing this particular aspect of it, what we are basically saying is that basically we are not talking about legalization, we are talking about medical marijuana, right? So, but this is basically a ruse, because if you look at globally, the health institutions and so on, they have not really come up with any approved drugs with regards to cannabis. Of course, there are 1 or 2 drugs that have been approved, but those are actually chemically refined, and I think there are 2 types of categories with regards to ganja, which is one is called CBD and the other one is THC. So what they have brought as a medicine for some of the rare cases of epilepsy is basically 2 types of drugs which was approved by FDA. So that is the only thing that so far that has been approved by the scientific community. So what the current topic is all about is the interested lobbyist group that are putting forward this proposal. There are lawyers who are coming in basically from the perspective of human rights, and also we have too many cases of ganja cases which people are being imprisoned and so on. I think that those are different kind of issues which we can tackle. For example, we can tackle in a way if there are people that are affected wrongly due to our harsh drug laws. So we can actually look at some aspect of it to see how we could prioritize with regards to going after because drugs users are basically got into the trap of these drug smugglers, drug traffickers, basically. So we should actually prioritize our focus with regards to fighting this particular menace by going after the drug traffickers. But what we are actually doing is basically liberalizing for everybody. So, but for this purpose, I want to look at the Singapore model. Singapore government is very, very clear in terms of how they are treating this particular new trend. Basically, they have said that this they call it as a myth in the I think even the minister has called it as a myth that this medical marijuana and all that is basically is unproven, because there's not much evidence available scientifically to say that these drugs are available for certain treatment, right? So even if there is even that CBD drugs that are available for the epilepsy also got side effects and so on. There are too many side effects, so it is not really recommended per se. So you look at it, the doctors are not fighting for it. The scientists who are really in charge of this research on medical and so on, they are really not fighting for this particular aspect. So what we see is the other type of groups, maybe the alternative medicines, who would like to champion. So those are the people who are actually driving this. So I see this particular aspect is totally unnecessary for Malaysia, and what we're going to see is that there is going to be the number of drug addicts in this country is going to grow even more higher, because uncontrolled. Even if you introduce as a medical marijuana, there is no universal standard on what is considered an approved medicine. So it's going to give a loophole, and the dispensaries are going to be abusing this particular process, especially given Malaysia's situation, because we are very lax in enforcement per se.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gauss. That's a very compelling argument with many valid points. I believe that one of the points that you have made is that there is no evidence scientifically on medical marijuana and its possible side effects. I believe that Prof. Vigna, working in Center for Drug Research, should have quite a lot to say on this topic. Prof. Vigna, could you please comment on this?
Thank you. Do you want me to just comment on this statement, or do you want me to just talk on the whole?
Please state whatever opinions that you have. We'll be happy to hear it.
Okay, so I think it's important to, I'll respond to the point first. Can you repeat that again for me so that I make sure I get it right?
Yes, I believe that the general gist is that there is lack of evidence scientifically on the usage of medical marijuana and its possible side effects.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think like what Mr. Gauss had just said, I think there's two, medical marijuana has been approved for two indications for seizures for children, and they are approved by the FDA America. So there are two medications, Marinol and Nabilon, approved for Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut epilepsy for children, as well as nausea for people who are undergoing chemotherapy. So there are two actually indications where medical marijuana has been approved as a medication to treat, and these are very rare, but at the same time, nausea for chemotherapy can be very unpleasant. I think if you talk of side effects, in anything and everything that we do, there are side effects, there are effects. Okay, even if you eat a particular food that is healthy, if you eat too much of it, there are effects from that food, right? So anything that is good for you also, if you do it too much, it may not be good. So any medicine that we take has got side effects, or most of them at least have got some form of side effects. So I think the doctors would always weigh the side effects, the benefits, the pros and cons of these side effects, whether the side effects can be tolerated and it will be beneficial in treating the illness or treating the problem that the patient has. So I think that's always they have to balance that. Okay, so you cannot run away. I think in most, if not all medications, there's some sort of form of side effects. So whether they can be tolerated, they cannot be tolerated, whether it outweighs the benefits that the patient may get in the long term of treating the illness is something the clinician will always take into consideration. So to answer the question, there are two indications where it has been approved, medical marijuana has been approved to treat these two indications. And of course, there are research that's going on for other indications as well. Of course, there's people use it for a whole lot of, if you go and check the net, people use it for a whole range of other things that they claim. So far, their claims that it is beneficial to them. I myself have heard evidences of, I've heard people or parents of children who saying they use it for, various things to manage their children's problems and so on. There are doctors who claim this and that, but of course, all these are not approved for these kind of indications yet. But to answer the question, there are medications that have been, there is medical marijuana approved for these two indications. So do you want me to stop there or go on to respond to other points and so on? Or
Rina, you could just tell us your overall opinion on why you disagreed with our prompt.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to be very clear, I think we are talking here about medical marijuana, not marijuana for recreational purpose. Okay, so we have to be very clear. We're talking for medical purposes only and not for recreational purpose. So if you talk of medical marijuana, why I agree is, or why I disagreed with the point that you said was, I think there are many illnesses out there that so far has not got a cure, or patients suffer immensely from pain, from all kind of issues from having a particular disease. And you have cancer patients when they've run out of all other medications that are available or that have been approved to treat whatever illness they're suffering from. There is really no harm in trying something, even though if it's not approved, that may be beneficial for them. Okay, so it is important. The first point that I would like to make here is we're talking about medical use and not recreational use of marijuana. And I think it's important to also understand the historical use of cannabis in globally. And I think while we're talking about it in a modern sense, cannabis has been used traditionally by societies almost all around the world for centuries, and they have been using it to manage a whole range of issues that people face, so a whole range of course, they have not been proven scientifically, but it is an organically grown plant that people have used it traditionally for centuries to help them and so on. So in the sense that this has been used historically, and I think one needs to also understand how cannabis became banned in the world. How drugs are classified. How drugs are classified in the by the world or by the United Nations is the scheduled drugs under Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and so on. So if you read about how the United Nations actually schedules drugs, and how the International Narcotics Control Board comes into effect to schedule drugs, there is also a lot of politics in how the scheduling takes place. And of course, in the old days, how when drugs were scheduled and kind of banned, the issue of drugs was always looked at it from the point of enforcement, or from the point of enforcers. It was never looked at from the point of healthcare or public health, or professionals who are working in the area of health, simply because people did not understand the whole this representation in the United Nations or in the International Narcotics Control Board did not consist people from the health background. It only consists of people from the enforcement background. Even until today, the INCB and the Commission for Narcotics Drugs, who actually decides which drug should be banned and so on, they consist mostly people from enforcement background. Even the Malaysian delegation to the United Nations for this yearly meeting consists mainly from people from enforcement background. So the approach or the slant taken is always from an enforcement point of view. But over the years, we have come to understand that drug use itself should be considered as a health problem. I think Mr. Gauss just now talked about, enforcement and so on. And I think in our country, we enforce drugs laws. It's not lack of enforcement. I think we over-enforce that. If you look at our prisons today, the government keeps talking of building new prisons, but more than 50 to 60% of our prisoners today are drug users, not drug traffickers. They are drug users. People who use very small amount of drugs get thrown away into prison. So we have not changed our paradigm now to understand drug use from a health perspective, but we continue to enforce. So the whole issue of understanding the drug problem is actually very biased towards an enforcement approach. So I think that needs to shift. So once we change that shift to a health-based perspective, then the use, I'm not saying all drugs can become medicines, but we're talking of cannabis here, and we are looking at it purely from a medicinal point, not for legalization. Now we are looking at medical use of cannabis. I would think that if it has been used for hundreds of years by traditional societies for all kinds of ailments, it is worth to investigate and to do further research to try to see, as the world has approved, or the US has approved it for 2 indications. Traditional societies use it for a whole range of other indications. So I think the medical fraternity or the medical scientific world should to do more research to see whether this is actually the traditional claims where it can cure many other or manage other illnesses. Should be more research should be conducted to see whether this has any basis. So I would argue from that point.
Thank you, Prof. Vigna. Next, let's hear from a medical student's point of view, Mr. Ian.
So yeah, my opinions on this prompt. The prompt was it is unnecessary to legalize medical marijuana, which honestly I fully agree with. We learn something called health knowledge and society in our program lah. Basically, it teaches us like our country's preparedness for certain diseases and for certain drugs. So I can tell you that yes, we are a developing country, and right now it is definitely not necessary. Maybe in the far future, like when everything else is settled, like in America or maybe some other places like Canada, they are more settled than us. But right now we are still a developing country. There are a lot more things that we should focus on. So it's definitely not necessary at all. So there are many other drugs and like other aspects which are more important lah. And legalizing this will only cause sorry to say that, but it will only cause more problems, leading to a higher crime rate. And it's just solely because our country is not ready or not prepared to deal with the consequences. Well, one of the points raised by Mr. Vigna just now was that a lot of the drugs or a lot of the things are tightly regulated. But honestly, in my opinion, right, there's a lot of dangerous things in this world which are tightly regulated by laws, but yet gun murders still happen, drug overdoses still happen. So like, even if it's tightly regulated, people will find a way. So the best way to prevent all of this is just to not legalize it lah, so to say, just not even be in our country. So yeah, I also think, right, as a medical student, we understand why certain drugs must be FDA approved. And the average cost to approve a drug is about up to $1 billion and 20 years in research. So that's what we learn in health knowledge and society. So sadly, medical marijuana hasn't had that much research, especially in this time of day, and especially in the current situation of our country. It's just really not necessary lah. And then like all this time and money, right, which we are going to put into medical marijuana research, honestly, why don't you put that time and money into research into other alternative medicines lah, which are more suitable, FDA approved, and also we have so many other diseases which are more prevalent right now, killing millions, billions, not billions, millions of people every year. It's those neglected tropical diseases. I won't go too much into that, but there's 30 of them, and we are lacking trillions of ringgits of research into all of them. So why don't use that time and effort, into this medical marijuana thing and treat those first? Save more lives with those. And right now, that's why I just feel like it's totally unnecessary. And also recently there's like an abolishment of death penalty in Malaysia. So like you're only gonna promote like drug trafficking even more if you're just gonna bring marijuana in. What is the goal of medical marijuana in the first place? Is to treat people. But then if you were to bring medical marijuana in at this current situation, at this current time, you legalize it, right? It's just gonna cause more issues than to fix the problem that you are trying to fix in the first place. Drug traffickers, like, yeah, it's just not worth it lah. It's just not ready right now. And then recently, you know, in the news, we've heard 4-year-old children overdosing on methamphetamine or something like that. It was a very critical situation. Like, you know, methamphetamine is tightly regulated, but yet things like this still happen. So that's just my opinion. So I fully agree that it is unnecessary to legalize medical marijuana at this point in time. But maybe in the far future, who knows?
Thank you, Mr. Ian. So far we've heard a lot on drug trafficking and enforcement and regulation issues. Could I please have Mr. Farhan to tell us his opinion? Mr. Farhan, I believe your mic.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Or from the medical point of view, they say that cannabis can help cancer patients. Cancer treatments now cost almost hundreds of thousands. I mean that per cycle. How many people actually can afford that at this very moment? And what happened to those who cannot afford cancer treatments? I mean that less than 30% of Malaysians right now cannot even afford insurance. And people who actually can pay for the treatments are paying it through insurance. And now we are letting a lot of cancer patients just roll over and die just because they cannot afford the current cancer treatment. So the ultimatum of providing alternative cancer treatment is actually an ongoing. It's progressive. It's not simply, we cannot just dismiss an idea just because it's a necessity. It is an idea which requires research. And we are dismissing this idea. I mean that early literature will provide data that marijuana has been in use from the Japanese, I cannot say civilization, like from the Japanese civilization, from Indian civilization, Muslims, Islamic civilization as well. And we have from the date, Ibn Sina, or in Western world known as Avicenna, has produced a book, Mohammedan, solely focusing on the relevance of marijuana plant in medical point of view. And we also mislooked that in 2018, WHO has already took up marijuana from the dangerous drugs list. And I mean that from the international point of view, now since 2018, I can bring a container worth of marijuana on international waters, and I mean that I can transport a container of marijuana on international waters, and it's not an offense anymore. And from WHO data since 2018, zero offense relating to marijuana. Like I said, data can be manipulated. What actually we have to focus on is from the realistic point of view. We are looking at a very big circle and we have forgotten that we have to look issues at a very small circle, and we have to look at the pragmatic sense of marijuana in the community. And I usually take Canada as an example. And what our friend has said, that Canada is a very developed country. Yes, it's a developed country, and we are developing. And it means that we have a role model for us to follow. It has been used for thousands of years, and we are dismissing an idea just from our 20 to 30 years of experience. So it seems a little bit unfair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farhan. Before we move on to a second prompt, let's move to Mr. Randy. for your opinion.
All right, thank you, host. So for the prompt, legalization of drugs unnecessary in Malaysia, I would say I agree. Well, this is because, like Sir Gaush has previously stated, I don't think our country should be focusing in that area as of right now because we have many other sectors to work on. One of the important sectors that we should work on is development. We have many industries such as safety or infrastructure that we should work on. Currently, if we look at the area like KL, Selangor, it's quite developed. But if we shift our focus from the West Malaysia over to East Malaysia, we can easily see that it's quite underdeveloped. So we should shift all that time in research instead of going to study the legalization of medical marijuana. We should put all that time and effort into that instead, because there are lots of residents out there suffering water shortage. We often hear cases of university students suffering water shortage in their hostel, as we say. So all this, if we put focus into that, we could actually master a better generation of students and our future leaders. So if we give them a better environment, and they will further enhance the country in the future. So that's why I think that it's not essential to focus on that now, because we can focus on other infrastructures. Another thing that I would like to say why I agree with this prompt is because I don't think our country right now is strict enough to handle medical marijuana legalization, because drug trafficking right now in Malaysia is quite strict, but as strict as it is, it will somehow find its way and creep into the residents and all the users, and this will lead to the misuse of medical marijuana, because for a fact that we know medical marijuana comes from a plant called hemp, and scientific name, and it's like cannabis. All it needs is a little bit of ventilation, growing medium, nutrients, and water, and we can easily grow this plant. And it has been stated before that in Malaysia that you can grow medical marijuana, but of course you have to have a permit for that. But imagine all of the people who got the idea when the government introduced medical marijuana, when the government says that, oh, we're going to initialize the usage of medical marijuana, they will have the idea like, oh, why have we not used this before? It's natural, it's easy, it's cheap compared to other drugs, maybe like opioids or cocaine, and that will instill this bad behavior, and this will lead to misuse of medical marijuana. So before legalization of drugs, medical marijuana, I believe that the government should give proper education in this first beforehand, and we should really make sure that all our citizens are really educated on this point, because if not, it will bring more harm than good use. Because I know Mr. Farhan has said we shouldn't just turn this a blind eye just because people say that it's bad. But however, I see it in a case of better being safe than sorry, because if one person somehow gets overdosed with this, that's one life away. Whereas instead, if we could wait and be prepared for this and make the take the right precautions, only then should we start legalization of medical marijuana. But as of now, I do not think our country is ready for that. And not only that, if we start to get the misusage of medical marijuana, it will have really bad side effects on those who use it, because we have impaired cognitive abilities, similar to like DUIs and all the alcohols. You have increased rate of accidents, overdoses, and all that. You have memory losses, and for medical usages, medical marijuana can be used by pregnant women to relieve the pain. However, it's really bad for their baby themselves, and this is very harmful, and we do not want that upon our citizens. And not only that, it also causes great lung damage if we were to use medical marijuana in the form of smoking. So that is all for me for this prompt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Randy. So to summarize the discussion on our first point, we have some excellent points such as the lack of regulation on medical marijuana, possible abuse of it, as well as how it is not a current priority in Malaysia. But on the other hand, we also have our speakers arguing that it has actually been FDA approved for certain types and the medical benefits do outweigh the cons and there is unfair stigma against marijuana in our society. Our second prompt is we'll start with Mr. Ian for being the odd man out.
Oh, okay. So if you look at it on a real life point of view, it is truly true that if you were to legalize medical marijuana, it does boost the economy of our country because right now like you said, a lot of people wants to use medical marijuana, but like no, well, not in that sense. Wait, let me use like an example. Let's just say the US lah. You see how US their usage of medical not even medical, their usage of marijuana has like boosted their economy by a lot. So, but also that comes with its disadvantages lah. So that's what I want to add. So I agree with the fact that like medical marijuana will boost the economy of our country. People will buy it. People will use it. Like what Mr. Farhan said just now, I believe the 2 million 2 million medical marijuana users, not including all the like the heavy smokers and all that. Yes, I do agree. I fully do agree. Yes, it does bring our country money. But on the other hand, right, the reason why I disagree with the whole legalization thing is not just solely for economical purposes. Like economical purposes, yeah, go ahead. But then I tend to look at the more like what Mr. Randy said, safe than sorry kind of deal. So if you were to legalize this, yeah, you boost the economy, but then, you know, lives are lives. Medical marijuana may be misused, unhealthy, and, you know, all the points that were raised previously. But yeah, in honestly, in my case, I fully agree with how medical marijuana will help to boost our economy. And considering our country right now, we kind of do need the boost, but maybe not by legalizing medical marijuana, maybe something else. Yeah.
Would any of our other speakers who disagree would like to comment on this? Yes, Mr. Gao?
The point I would like to make is that, you know, even you legalize it and make this economy local, but there's going to be a lot of harmful effects that is going to come with regards to the widespread use of this marijuana. So, you know, even though Prof said, even Mr. Farhan has talked about who you know, removing marijuana as one of the illegal drugs. Yes, they may have removed it, but if you look at their website today, they still have listed out more adverse impact with regards to the cannabis use. You know, they have a long list of you know, effect that will come in, which is like cannabis impairs cognitive development, your capability of learning. In this aspect, I want to comment is my personal experience. One of my friends who become a ganja addict, you know, basically. So ultimately, he committed. This did not happen in this country; it happened in India. But he committed about 6 murders in cold-blooded murder in just because he got this schizophrenia and he didn't know what he was doing and he committed that, you know, and he was just a ganja addict. Prior to that, he was just a normal person earning a good salary, good income and so on, but he had got into some family problems and got into this. Basically, the family problem came about because he got into the ganja problem. He became a ganja addict. So that has created, so these kind of things, innocent people dying and all that, there is cost to it. We normally don't measure these costs. and people dying in accidents, collisions, and all that. Some of it is due to DUI, and these people go and spend in jail for about 2 to 3 years. But you look at the family on the other side of it; they have to suffer. For example, if they are the breadwinner of that particular family, the children is going to suffer. The children is going to be taken care of by the social welfare department, like us. The taxpayer is going to pay for it. All these costs are not properly measured. That's why, if you look at Singapore, they have actually come up with the statistics. They said the cost of, they actually, if you look at their website, they have actually published it. If you allow me to read out, they have stated the cost is going to far outweigh the revenue that is going to come from this legalization aspect of it. You can check out their website. Is there? It's Central Narcotics Bureau. Of course, Prof may say this is all coming from the enforcement point of view, but it is just not enforcement alone. It is even scientists. You look at KKM today. The KKM, has made a statement. The KKM president has made a statement that today the legalization of marijuana, it is not something that can be decided overnight. He's a doctor, medical doctor. So you can see KKM itself, which is the health ministry, is not pushing for it. In fact, there may be a statement made by health minister, Khairi Jamaluddin. He may have made a statement to say that that certain drugs are already legal, but that is maybe that legal drugs are those which are already approved by FDA. I'm not sure which are the drugs he was talking about, but there are some drugs available which are legal. If that is the case, there is no harm. But those are regulated. But what happens is that the way they are pushing for it is to have alternative medicine, which is, if it is within the medical profession, there's not much going to be happening. But the way the lobbyists are working towards the legalization is introducing more like what is happening in the overseas country, which is having dispensaries outside the medical profession. This is where the control is not going to be there. So I think we need to measure the cost holistically. Yes, there may be a revenue on one side, but on the holistic side of it, you've got to look at the other aspect, impact. If you look, Singapore has done the study and they determined that it is not going to be overall gainful for the country and gainful for the economy. So I would subscribe to that particular view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just, I think earlier I talked about distinguishing between, or making the distinction between legalizing for general public and legalizing for medical purposes. And I think I would like to, listening to the discussion among colleagues today, I think there is a bit of difference in understanding or defining what we're talking about here. We're talking of medical cannabis. In my definition, when we talk of medical cannabis, I'm talking about where it is being classified or defined as a medicine. Therefore, this medicine cannot be prescribed by people who are not qualified. It has to be prescribed by a doctor. So one cannot, in my definition of medical cannabis here, I'm not saying that, I can self-diagnose and say I've got this particular problem and therefore I need cannabis and I can just go and buy it somewhere else from a shop. I'm not saying that. When I say legalizing medical cannabis here, it is a regulated medicine that is being prescribed only by physicians or by clinicians, and the medical condition has to be diagnosed by, so I'm seeing it in that sense.
Unfortunately, Prof, if I intervene, unfortunately, the doctors are not actually pushing for it. That's the point I want to make, because there's no association from Malaysia from a medical perspective.
Yes. To some extent, yes. To some extent, no, because there's a group of doctors. I think the Chief Justice chaired a panel yesterday or day before with a group of psychiatrists from University of Malaysia and some private practitioners. I know there's a group of physicians who are also pushing for it, especially the psychiatrists, who are treating mental health issues and so on. Anyway, I think the physician groups are divided. There are some who are for, and I think largely because also again these terms, when we talk of medical cannabis, I think it needs to be defined very clearly. What are we talking about here? So I gave you my definition of what. I'm not saying someone who can self-diagnose and say they've got this problem and therefore they need to to use cannabis. I'm not saying it in that sense, but someone where it is, you know, a healthcare professional has to prescribe it. And, you know, I agree. Why I disagreed here is because I think while it brings in a lot of immediate economic benefits, like what Mr. Gauss was saying, the long-term impact, like I said even earlier, if you do something too much of something, then it's not good. So the long-term or the indirect costs that you would get from if you loosely regulate if you just loosely call medical cannabis and allow, you know, people to generally use it in large quantities, then you're going to have other indirect costs that the healthcare system will need to take care of later on. You know, for example, like cigarettes is a good example. While the government collects a lot of tax revenue from, you know, the packet of cigarette that we are selling now at 20 ringgit, but when someone develops lung cancer, the healthcare system is bearing hundreds of thousands of dollars treating that single patient. And the cost is, yes, it will bring in a lot of money immediately, but the long-term impact, again, there's not much research done because I follow this very closely. For example, US and Canada have legalized marijuana, not medical, but legalized it. So, you know, people can smoke cannabis freely and so on. So the impact of that is not very well understood because it's very new, for a fact that these things you don't see impact within a year or two. So it may take, you know, 15, 20 years to see the impact of that. So we really do not know that. So, and I'm not in a position to comment on that. But in terms of the cost itself, I would say that, you know, while it'll bring direct benefits now, the indirect costs that the healthcare system or the societal costs that we may have to bear may outweigh the direct benefits that we are getting from making the money right now. So that's my point.
Okay, I just want to add, I'm agreeing with all the points that the real medical cannabis shouldn't be seen from a pecuniary point of view. I mean that Malaysia does not need an economic boost. We are already a rich country with the biggest oil reserves in Asia, I think, and we already have the money. I think that what I'm going to comment is more political in nature, I think. So I already have one video taken down, so I'm going to tread my words carefully. Medical cannabis, when we're with an ultimatum to help someone, we shouldn't view our objective from the monetary nature. It shouldn't be seen that, if we are seeing that 14 billion to Malaysia is second to none. I mean that it's almost nothing. We don't need an extra 14 billion. We have the 14 billions. Malaysia can generate 14 billions. So if we looking from that perspective and we are expecting a return from medical cannabis, then it defeats the purpose of helping someone. I mean that I'm just going to be very frank saying that I'm championing this issue almost 10 years now. And during my early years, it's very hard to find, beside doctors so surely will disagreeing with me, it's very hard to find lecturers, it's very hard to find academicians, or it's very hard to find any professionals that would agree to the notion of medical cannabis. Now, our integrity can even be questioned because a lot of people are championing for the wrong reasons. That's from my personal point of view. People are entering into this notion, despite this cause, for all the wrong reasons.
So Prof and Mr. Farhan actually basically championing this because you wanted to give alternative treatment for these patients who are suffering. Am I right? If I get in a way.
Okay. I know that. Okay, from Prof Bikna, I cannot say for him. Maybe for what? Okay, I take your example, Mr. Gauss, about your relative, that he has the effect of marijuana as hallucinogen. it's quite rare. Basically, most people when they inhale marijuana, most people would have the effect of relaxant. To some certain extent, it can act as hallucinogen as well. That's why he's developed the schizophrenia. But I'm not the medical practitioner. But maybe that's the case. I asked in court, so what would be the difference between taking the modern medicine and marijuana? So he says that taking modern medicine actually cut his appetite, making him a bit slow on his movement, and a bit, I think that he said that he's kind of sleepy all the time, and wakes up, he's kind of moody, giving him mood swings. So whenever he smoked marijuana, of course, like, he's happy, his appetite went up, and then, I mean that the major difference is that he eats more, but his regular checkup didn't show any signs of that his health is declining, you know. I mean that he, as good as he is taking the modern medicine. So we have this rough data. You get my point, you get my point. Whenever his checkup, his doctor always says, okay, you are in good shape as you were. And although he is not taking any modern medicine, the 7,000 ringgit from Australia, no, he's only smoked marijuana. So the doctors only comment on positively on his health, being as he's with this disease, this kind of disease. Okay, so what I'm trying to show is that this is the real purpose of why medical marijuana should be allowed.
Randy, do you have anything to add on?
From my side, I have quite agreed a lot with, especially with Mr. Gauss and Mr. Farhan, because I don't think legalizing medical marijuana right now will be boosting the economy of our country, because our country itself is not focused on the medical side. It's more focused on things like Mr. Farhan said, and in like oil, petroleum. We have a big company, Petronas. It's quite really well known in the world, and because of this, we shouldn't be focusing on the medical point of view. We should be focusing on our strengths, such as the oil plantations and all. So with this, I think that's why it's not going to boost our economy. And another thing that Mr. Gauss has mentioned is when legalizing medical marijuana, if we're looking at it in a general point of view, if it's like given to the public itself, as opposed to just only legalizing in medical side, then it will be bad, because everyone will have access to it, easy access to it. And as previously mentioned, all the side effects would be really bad. And because of misusage and everything, all the side effects and everything, we would not have good future leaders. And without good future leaders, our country will not develop well in the future. So without that, our economy will also go down the drain with it. So that is all from me, from my side. Yeah.
Speakers, here is your third and final prompt for the day. It is possible to legalize medical marijuana in Malaysia. It is possible to legalize medical marijuana in Malaysia.
If you guys don't mind, I would like to go first for this prompt. Okay, it's a bit ironic for me to disagree, but however, actually, I think that the question posed actually is a bit inaccurate. Under Dangerous Drugs Act, Section 6, possession of marijuana, cocaine, opium, 12 subsection 2, possession of these mostly synthetics listed in Schedule 1, Section 39A, subsection 1 and subsection 2 as well, and lastly Section 39B for for mengedar, for trafficking, drug trafficking. Section 6 and Section 12, for the purpose of possessing drugs, it will end with tanpa kebenaran yang sah. It ends with tanpa kebenaran yang sah, which means that if I have the kebenaran, dia sah.
So the laws are very old. It has not been changed with times. And I think I often say, one of my areas that I'm very interested in is also in drug policy. If you look at the dangerous drug law, the owner of the dangerous drug law is actually the Minister of Health. Not many people know that. They always think it's the Minister of Home Affairs. The Minister of Home Affairs does not own the act. It comes under the Minister of Health. And the thing with the licensing and permit, they can only be given to government and regulate, like what USM is, Badan Berkanun, statutory body. So the license right now, so a lot of companies want to get into the game now with cannabis, they want to make money from this, but they cannot get the license because the law is very clear. The license can only be given to a government or a statutory body agency. So private companies cannot get into the game. They have to team up with one of the statutory bodies or government agencies.
I think that the term used is either government officials or government. I think government officials. Give very broad interpretations of government servants. Means that so at that particular time, should you have the permission signed by the Ketua Pengarah KKM, and you've been you were detained by the side of the road, at the side of the road by police officers, and you have amphetamines in your pocket, let's say 5 grams, and can they actually charge you? I don't think so, because you have the kebenaran yang sah.
But remember, the kebenaran stipulates very clearly what you can carry and how much you can carry. So that is why when we talk of medical cannabis, I talk about this kind of regulatory framework that has to be there, where it's like a doctor giving you a prescription for a controlled substance, where it is prescribed, the amount prescribed, the dosage prescribed, and all for that particular problem. So I'm not talking of, again, legalization in the broader sense, where people are allowed to smoke freely and all that. So that's my position, and I don't think Malaysia is ready for that right now.
Technically speaking, it's already been legalized. It's a matter of regulatory framework, just like our Prof. Nasir.
The law allows that to happen, but there is memiliki morphine, you need permission. So kebenaran perlu ada. So the law is written that way. So that is why if you look at ketum, if you go to the northern parts of, I can have a ketum tree in my house now, but they cannot catch me for having a tree in my compound. The moment I pluck a leaf and I'm in possession of a leaf, if I carry 5 leaves in my car, I get stopped in a roadblock, then I'm in trouble, because then I'm in possession, membawa, or mengangkut. Then the law is very clear, you cannot. But if you have a tree in your house, the police can't do anything to you. So it is written that way, and of course the law also, when they write it, they won't say cannabis, they will say THC. It is the active compound. So that is why they send to the laboratory to test for the active compound, to say that leaf has got that particular compound which is banned. But you see, because medical marijuana is not approved or not legalized, people who are self-treating themselves now are getting into huge problems. If we were to legalize and create a proper legal framework around it, maybe we can regulate this. People who really would need it, can be diagnosed by a doctor and be prescribed. So that's the point that I'm trying to make here.
Right now, we're talking about what sort of regulation that should be in place, and who is driving it. Say, if it is not driven by people like Prof. or Mr. Farhan, who is actually aiming for the sake of the patients, who are suffering. So if it is driven from a commercial point of view and the lobbyists are behind it and they wanted to do it in a bigger scale and so on, and basically the medical marijuana is a cover for doing something more of a legalization. So that's where because politicians are, after all, is depending on the support that they get. So if they think this is a popular cause, and they may do it, and they may do it in a very wider scale, and like how Thailand has done it. And now Thailand is facing problem because there's too many issues that are cropping up, and they're trying to come up with something as an afterthought, and trying to put some regulations to tighten some of the aspect of it, especially the recreational use part of it. At some point, the marketing Thailand as an open country where tourists can come and take ganja, but now they are saying not for recreational use. So they are a bit confused. And you see, Thailand is not a functional democracy. Like Prof mentioned about Dr. Ganja planting his wood. Again, he's doing something out of regulation. It cannot be done. If everybody started doing something that they are thinking that they are doing something good for the society, who is going to draw the line? I think it is going to lose value for your cost basically, and people will be thinking that, oh, this is for commercial purposes. Anybody get caught with ganja, they will say, oh, I try to use this for the purpose of medicines. Right?
Thailand moved very fast without thinking. Now they're backtracking a bit. Malaysia, on the other hand, is on the other extreme. We have done nothing, and I find that we have several agencies involved, and what Thailand did was they had a central agency coordinating efforts, whereas Malaysia, our response has been very fragmented. You have Minister of Agriculture saying something, Minister of Health saying something, Minister of Home Affairs saying something. So we are shooting in all sides, from all sides. We don't have a concerted effort. We don't have a coordinating agency that's putting together this, facilitating this. Because
Mr. Ian, anything to add on?
My point of view is more idealistic, like what the government could and would do to achieve this, but definitely not happening lah. Can say like that lah. So I believe that if Mr. Farhan said, certain laws change on certain things, definitely legalizing medical marijuana is possible. Educating the public first, so that they don't misuse it. Number 2, laws. Number 3, once Malaysia finishes developing their other sectors, or they got everything else settled with, then honestly, I wouldn't see why medical marijuana is not possible to be legalized. When Malaysia finds the correct situation, the correct time, the correct amount of resources to back up, or to have the amount of research to back up this legalization of medical marijuana, the amount of resources to deal with the certain misuses or whatever that might happen, then yeah, medical marijuana is definitely possible to be legalized.
We have the rough data. People who claims that marijuana gives positive effects on their bodies. No one actually dares to step up, proving whether these claims, whether true or untrue. And this refusal to step up means a delay in someone else's life.
That's where the professors, the academicians, and the scientists and all that is coming to play, because they have got more liberty to do more research.
Even when we talk about research, when I said just now about sorting out or getting the regulatory framework right, it's not easy to do research in this area, because again, you need all the relevant permissions and approval. And
money is also another issue. Mr. Yan pointed out, it's not easy to do research, and a lot of money is needed, for example, to buy equipment and so on.
Before we conclude our session, Mr. Randy, do you have anything to add on?
Personally, I do not have much to add on, but the discussion, I believe it went quite well. And for my reason on why I agree that it's possible to legalize medical marijuana in Malaysia is because it only takes a few people, dedicated people, to actually sit down and do the work, make good research. But it takes quite a lot of effort and a lot of money to make the research, right? But if that's possible, then of course it's possible to legalize medical marijuana. But yeah, overall, I don't see why it's not possible, because for now, like I said, we just I think at one point Mr. Ian has said we just have to do preparation and everything. And like Professor Vigner has said, we have to figure out what we need and strategize, what we prioritize and everything for our country as of now. And then further in the future, bring it in and then weigh out the pros and cons, be prepared for it, and then only utilize this in our system. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Randy. So to summarize our third prompt on whether is it possible to legalize medical marijuana in Malaysia, Mr. Farhad, as our only speaker who disagreed with our prompt, raised the point that regulation of medical marijuana is difficult, as well as lobbyists who might prioritize profit instead of safety, and the government's refusal to issue a medical license for the usage of medical marijuana. However, a lot of our other speakers believe that with proper legal framework and procedures, dedicated personnel, and by educating the general public on medical marijuana, it is indeed feasible for Malaysia to legalize medical marijuana. Thank you, everyone, for your interesting answers. It's been very eye-opening to hear perspectives from various different fields and professions. Unfortunately, it's time to end our event for now. I would like to once again express my gratitude to our speakers today for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us and for sharing your valuable knowledge and opinions with us. Thank you all and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
All. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, before we wrap up today's video, I'd like to give a shout out and thank our sponsors for this video, Amir Kushairi and Associates and Grazi for making this event possible. Amir Kushairi and Associates is an award-winning law firm based in Shah Alam, Selangor. As a result of their encouraging progressions, they have received many awards, nominations, and honorary accolades from a wide variety of areas and groups of clients, each with its own legal challenges and responsibilities. It is an honor to have Amir Kushairi as one of our sponsors for ALSA UKM Middle Ground 2022. Next up, we're also proud to have Grazi to be our main sponsor for the Lucky Draw session, which we will explain further on in the video, so stay tuned for more. Grazi is first known for their Barrister Bears, which took the internet by storm. Their aim is to curate and provide the best gifts for whatever special or auspicious event that you may have. Our mission is to assure that your gift to your loved ones will be a gift that is unique, worth remembering, and meaningful. My personal favorites as a law student are their Barrister Bears and also their Barrister Bear cufflinks, and now they even sell medical bears. How cute is that? Do check them out in their social media and visit their Instagram at Grazi_co for more. As mentioned earlier, Grazi will be giving out a Barrister Bear, Gold Scale of Justice cufflinks, and Silver Scale of Justice cufflinks to the lucky draw winners of this video. So, in order to join this lucky draw, all you have to do is like this video, share this video on your Instagram story, and also leave a comment down below on what did you learn from the video. Who knows, you might even win yourself a Barrister Bear. And that is all for ALSA UKM Middle Ground 2022. ALSA, always be one.